Welcome again, everybody. Episode 103 to Chaps Mini Culture. So you've done your very best to make sure things are set up smoothly for your team across distance, but eventually something has to give, and maybe there's a little bit of conflict sneaking in and you want to make amends. Let's talk about how we might do that, shall we? Ooh, another hump day comes upon us.
What did you call me?
Hump? That's right, I just called you.
I thought we were getting on with each other. What is this? You insulting me now?
It's a misunderstanding. Don't interpret what I'm talking about.
Are you sure about that? I heard you say something. I'm not sure what I want to make that mean.
Yeah, I know. Well, see how easy that can happen? It can happen. You know, I can just say something and it gets misinterpreted and something goes awry, and then all of a sudden we're in conflict. It happens. It happens. Yeah.
Happened so what can we do once, unfortunately?
Yeah, I know. That happens. It happens. So what can we do about it? You know, if you're a leader and you're trying to manage a project and you've got people all around the world, wonderfully talented, competent people that are actually doing their job well, and all of a sudden maybe two or maybe you and another person have a conflict, you start to see a little bit of tension coming in, at least from your side, you know. So this is something that happens quite often. We see this in especially across distance, right? Especially when we're not together and we don't have that kind of regular, you know, water cooler talk that we have between each other, you know. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic, yeah.
I'm curious to hear where our friends and family and followers and maybe, I don't know, do we have fans? I don't know. I'm not sure yet. People who watch this, it's you looking at us. That's who I'm talking about.
That's right.
So I'm curious what type of strained relationships you have worked through. Let us know where in the world you're dialing in from today. Give us a shout out, give us a like, give us a heart, give us a clapping hands, whatever icon you have on your end. Let us know you're watching. Let us know you're liking this. Also, do let us know if you don't like it, and go ahead and strain your relationship with us. Go ahead, do that.
That's right.
And we'll see how and if we are able to repair that.
Yeah, well, you think about, you know, there might be people, obviously our audience, some of our audience might be people that are living not in their native country like us. You know, we have families all over the place. You know, we're not going to talk about family relationships. That's a little bit more context than we're probably qualified to talk about. What we're here to talk about is just hopefully just professional relationships at this stage anyway.
By the way, in the United States, we're approaching probably the biggest family holiday of the year, which will be tomorrow. So if you're watching this tomorrow, it's already that day. See what I did there? Time travel. So Thanksgiving in the United States, the biggest holiday, the family holiday in the United States, is Hollywood makes movies about the strained relationships within families. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you fix the human connection, the interpersonal connection with somebody that you work with if you're out of your depth, if you're maybe not in your native water, if you're fish out of water. My favorite principle for this is, and I don't want to say this will work for all of you. I'm only suggesting this, but one of the principles that I found helped me was by a gentleman from Mexico, an author by the name of Don Miguel Ruiz. And the gentleman wrote a book called The Four Agreements. And one of the four agreements is to not assume. So if you think that the relationship is strained or there's some tension and conflict there, that is something that you feel, and you want to reassure yourself first if the other person feels that same thing or something similar. So, because nothing that people do or say has per se anything to do with me. It has everything to do with them, right? So what I am in control of is not the other person's behavior. I'm only in control of my own behavior. So if there is a strain in the relationship, I want to ask myself, what is it that I can do to fix this? What is it that I can do to make amends, regardless of how the other person acts, because their behavior is outside of my control, right? I really like this book, and as you continue this thread, Brett, I will turn around and grab it from the bookshelf.
Well, you do that, sir. Just here's one we prepared today. We should do a cooking show. This is one we prepared today.
This is it. Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. I can highly recommend that.
Yeah. Well, of course, let's establish that. I mean, is there a problem in the first place? That, to your point, your perception of what is a problem may not be a problem for somebody else. Their behavior might be motivated by something else that is completely not related to what you're doing and talking about. So is it a problem that has actually arisen out of your interaction with this other person? And maybe it's not. So your perception is everything. You would think about, we think about our motives, but we only react through the actions of other people, right? The other person's behaviors. So that's a disconnect already. So it's just establishing, is it a problem?
Yeah, that is often the question, because you might perceive it as a problem. Is it a problem for the other people involved? So the question leading up to, is there a problem, is what is the situation at hand? And this is something that really takes practice, and that takes some work on ourselves, is to look at a situation without judgment, because if I classify a situation, a relationship, a strained relationship, a scenario, if I classify that as a problem, then I'm already putting a value judgment on it. So before we do that, let's ask ourselves, what's going on here? What is the situation? Who's doing what? And then, as a second step, how might this be a problem? Is there, in fact, a problem? If so, okay, in which context is this a problem? Is this a problem only for one person or for everybody involved? Do others outside of this strained relationship feel the effect of the strain? So it's easy to point blame. It's easy to point the finger and say, well, this person didn't, or I made a mistake, and therefore that's the surface level. If we want to unpack it, especially when we're dealing with behavioral differences, we need to make ourselves aware whether it is in fact a problem, and how specifically is it a problem.
Absolutely. And then, of course, is it the same issue, to your point, just building on that? Is your problem, or the thing that you perceive as a problem, the same for the other person? There may be, in working in teams, there's processes and there's people and there's products, right? So somebody might see a problem with a person, but another person on their team might say, actually, it's really just the process I'm concerned about. That's what I want to resolve here, not the person. So that disconnect can also needs to be explored with between colleagues as well.
Next question.
I'm sorry?
You have a bunch of questions queued up here. I'm curious what's next here.
Absolutely. Direct or indirect. So does somebody, when you come to resolving and talking about this, is it something that somebody just wants to really come up with a direct resolution to the problem? Is there a literal way? Something misunderstandings come through. Maybe my indirect way of doing something is perceived very literally by somebody else. And so my motivation, getting back to that point, my motivation was just to do X, but they saw Y, right? They saw a completely different thing because they just took the literal translation of what I said. So that can cause misunderstandings as well. So the understanding from a cultural point of view, this is really when it gets into culture, what is taken literally and what can be a little bit more, if we move into this, maybe a little bit more high context, right?
And what adds to that is a person's flexibility or comfort level with confrontation. So if we feel that there is a strain in the relationship, if we feel that there's tension, some behaviors are very comfortable in directly addressing this and going into the pain point, into the perceived confrontation, because they feel that confronting it head on directly will resolve the issue and will clear the air quicker. It's almost like a thunderstorm clearing the tension, right? For other cultures, for other behavioral prototypes, this is a no-go. Confrontation is hurting face, is hurting somebody's honor, and will even deepen the rift that's already been there. So you want to be really painfully aware of how much confrontation is appropriate given your context.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that gets into, does it need to be rehashed? Some people who like that, that's a great analogy, the thunderstorm, right? I'm happy to throw some thunder and lightning at you and clear the air and say, this is what my issue is. I'm going to tell you exactly, I'm going to be honest with you. This is kind of, I'm going to trust you that you accept my honesty. That can be, but for other cultures, that can be very confronting. So once that person who throws the thunderbolts and lightning and all that kind of stuff, that once they move on, they're done. They're happy. They are happy to move on, and they don't even think about that issue when it comes to moving forward. But other cultures, it's not holding grudges. I think that's a negative way to look at it. But it does kind of inform how they move forward. And maybe they're a little bit unsure, a little bit gun shy, then working with that person that's been so direct, kind of waiting for this storm to come again. And perhaps they don't believe that it's been resolved. So
maybe they believe that this is a stormy relationship that it may clear for now, but the next front is already on its way, right? The next dark clouds are already looming in the distance. The question, does it need to be rehashed, brings me back to our episode yesterday, or the day before, when we talked about going back to basics. I think it was the Monday episode, right? The 101. When is it time to go back to basics? When is it time to go back to base camp of your relationship? What were the parameters under which you decided to work together, be together in a professional context? There was a premise, there was a mutual understanding that this makes sense. The two of us, or the group that we work together for a common cause, for a common purpose, with an intent of getting something done. So sometimes when we want to rehash, it's time to go back to base camp and look at what is it that got us started on this path.
Yeah, absolutely. And now the other tricky one, which can really throw a spanner in the works, is the hierarchy. Now, say you're the senior person. Culturally, the person you're having a little bit of an issue with, or a little bit of tension with, sees you as somebody that they don't have any right whatsoever to challenge. And perhaps there is some underlying tension from their part, but they feel it's not appropriate in the terms of the hierarchy to challenge the person, the boss, when it comes down to that. And if you come from an egalitarian side of the equation, where you're inviting and you expect people to be absolutely open with you, and they disagree with you, and you're not getting that tension builds again. You get frustrated by them not being honest with you, right? That's a misconception, that they're hiding something, they're not being honest, when quite frankly they're not brought up in an environment where it's appropriate to challenge the person that's higher up. So then you have to really take steps to maybe explore using some of the tools we use, some assessments, to make them aware of their tendencies in that area, so that they can see that your tendencies might be different, and you're welcome to open to that. And so it frees them up to at least start this conversation about what is bothering them, so that you can really release them from the tension, so they can get on with their job. Yeah.
And the concept cuts the same way in the opposite direction. If you're in a if you come from a culture, from a behavioral background in which hierarchical power distribution is the norm, is something that you're used to, and you feel like there is tension on your team that cannot be resolved with your top-down authoritarian style, these tool and these coaching agreements that we have with our clients will help you decipher how you can unpack your hierarchy without giving it up. We're not asking you to change who you are. However, take maybe a nuanced approach to how you live your position or your role in this relationship, because you can be hierarchical in a more authoritarian, my way or the highway kind of approach, or you can be hierarchical leader. You can be the top of the pyramid in more of a paternalistic or maternalistic style, where you use yourself as the one that cares for the people in your group and supports their best efforts, right? So it's a way of looking at that, and the way we work with our clients is to understand that if there is a relationship that's under stress or that is strained, as we call this episode, then it's not about completely giving up your style in favor of the resolution of the issue. Again, it's not about you. Excuse me. It's not about the other person that needs to change. You don't need to make everybody happy on the team. It's about how do you become behaviorally flexible in order to rehash that relationship.
Yeah, it takes a little bit, short term, it takes a little bit of style switching to move into that side of things. Something we'll touch on a little bit in the one after this, but we're going to check first of all our biases. So how historical experience working with somebody from the same culture or somebody from the same background, or even function in another part of a company, can inform how, we've got to, again, that reference, that episode of getting back to basics, is to kind of do a reset and say, understand that this person is an individual. Culturally, there might be a general kind of tendency towards a certain set of behaviors. Doesn't mean this person is the same. And so we need to check our biases and not apply and say, well, that person is just the same as the other person I work with from that culture. They're all the same, and therefore, your biases kick in, and it colors the way that you bring your interactions with those people. So, just to always kind of use that as a bit of a reset again. Yeah.
Oh, and I find myself violating this quite a bit, right? So I go into relationships or confrontations or conversations with a preset notion of what type of behavior am I to expect here in this situation, because the person that I'm dealing with is in that organizational department. So I presuppose that there'll be a certain behavior display due to the function that person serves, or maybe due to the national background, ethnic background, religious background, linguistic, socioeconomic background. I recognize that sometimes I go into relationships based on my biases. And let's face it, we all have them. It's not that we can turn it off. It's, as we say here, you want to check them. You want to be aware of them and decide for yourself, is it serving you to move forward with that bias mode switched on, or is it better serving you to maybe suspend the bias for the time being in order to get the outcome you want?
You've just kind of brought to mind something that I see comes through in the global mobility side of the business. We're often we do an exploration about, or we not check in about the background of the person, but the simple LinkedIn search about somebody and our clients before we meet them can have a positive and negative effect. We can see somebody who's an engineer and think, well, okay, so when we think we're clever, right? We then want to meet this person and assume that an engineer is very high, they're really focused on the process. They're focused on the highly engineered outcome of what's going on. So we need to be kind of more linear in the way that we present our material. And then we see somebody who's a salesperson or maybe a creative person, and we think, oh great, now I can bore them to tears with my wonderful stories, because they're really going to be impressed by how much creativity I can bring to this presentation. And then we turn up and the person may not be completely, they might be completely opposite to that. We've had that experience before. So again, you know, checking those biases and thinking, yeah, okay, I've got some general information, but now I want to make sure that when I meet them first, I still do the proper due diligence in the real time, so that I'm presenting my material in a valid way for them. Yeah.
But it requires, and we said this on many episodes before, and I harp on it quite a bit. Global success is not just about cultural intelligence. It's an important puzzle piece, but we also need emotional intelligence. We need to be empathetic. We need to be able to, well, it's easy to say you need to be empathetic. That's something we want to work on, right? That's something that we can develop over time. Emotional intelligence means understanding your own emotional complexity and recognize that your counterparts may not fall into the same baskets. Their emotional makeup might be a bit different from yours. Those of you who are parents may have had the opportunity to practice that frequently, because chances are you have a life partner, or at least you had a life partner in order to become parents. Not all of you, but most of you, I would suspect. And then you have kids who will maybe not have the same emotional fabric that your personality has. So practicing the recognition of other emotional, what's the word, emotional compositions of a human being, that is something that you want to practice, and empathy will help you get there. However, in order to be empathetic, you want to be aware of how are you feeling? How is this affecting you? How's the relationship important to you? And sometimes when the relationship is hurting because you screwed up, somebody else screwed up, or there's just a misconstruction of behaviors, a misunderstanding of behaviors, we gotta allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We have to allow ourselves to show some of these emotions, even if we feel like they might hurt us in this relationship.
Yeah.
In my experience, vulnerability has helped me more than it hurt me.
Yeah, I believe it does. But of course, you know, not everybody's able to do that. They're not brought up in a culture that kind of not values. I mean, they value the emotion, but displaying it is sometimes not appropriate in that setting. So it is harder for
my culture. Yes. I was certainly not brought up that way.
Right, absolutely. So it's an interesting. It's an interesting path to tread, you know, when you've got a team where there's two or maybe more people that are experiencing strained relationships. Understand that they're feeling that strain as well, and their feelings need to be validated just as yours do as well. So, leading by example is often a good way, but being careful to know when it's time to style switch, know when it's time to say, okay, if I become emotional, I'm going to make this other person uncomfortable. I need to be cognizant of that, and perhaps, you know, that will put up other blocks, you know, cause other conflict that you don't want to bring up. So, very interesting topic. We'd love to hear from you. What has worked for you in terms of resolving conflicts between yourself and other people across distances when you haven't got as I said, that ability to be able to just hang out at the water cooler and understand somebody on a deeper level. It makes it difficult. We want to see what your tactics have brought up. Yeah.
And if you're experiencing a strained relationship right now, or if you're working through some of these issues and they're immediate for you and you're at your wit's end, let us know. Brett and I might have a tip or two up our sleeves to help you work through that.
I got sleeves.
I even rolled them up for you, right?
Oh, you're in work mode. I got to roll up my sleeves.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to roll up my sleeves.
Got to get it done. All right. Thank you, everybody. This was episode, what was it? 103, right? Man, we're chugging along here. This is awesome. We'll see you again tomorrow. Happy hump day.
Okay. See you.